So I'm going to start off with a story. So there was a little boy. He came home from school, and his report card was not a very good one. And he showed it to his dad, and his dad was really upset. He signed it, and he gave him a message to pass on to the teacher the next day. So little boy goes in the next day to his teacher and hands back the report card. It's been signed and says, you know, my dad saw the report card and said, the next time I bring something home like this, somebody's going to be in big trouble. So if I were you, I'd watch out. And that's one of the things that I think kind of frames this unit. The idea, I think, sometimes teaching controversial subjects, especially this election, which is particularly kind of polarized and particularly vindictive and particularly nasty, that sometimes as teachers we get really worried about, well, if I teach this in my class, am I going to get a parent who complains or an administrator who comes in and talks to me about it, or am I going to get fired? Am I going to end up on the news because my children were ripping each other's hair out because they couldn't decide whether they wanted Trump or Hillary, right? So hopefully what we'll do today is we'll talk through an approach that we have to teaching the election that is fun, that is engaging, that will work certainly for this election cycle, which is kind of a tricky one, but also would work for any election cycle. But before we do that, I'm going to do like a 5-minute blast through what we do in education here at the Foundation. Some of you may be pretty familiar with the programs that we have here. Some of you might not be, so you'll forgive me if some of this is redundant. But I think when people come to a museum and teachers come to a museum, primarily they think of, okay, well, my interaction with the museum is probably going to be a field trip, right? Maybe once a year, 3 hours, and if it's a good field trip, I'll go back year after year. I know Carolee over there comes back year after year, although she's not coming back this year, right? Unfortunately. The Situation Room, okay, coming back. Our approach is not at all like that. Our approach in education, certainly we have programs like that, and we have a wonderful award-winning field trip program, but really the goal of our education program is to foster connections with teachers, with students, and to build the sorts of informed citizens that we know our country needs. So I'm going to really quickly just kind of cruise through how we do that. And I love this picture. We're publishing a new book on our education programs, and I love this one mostly because it has a dog on it. Any dog people out there? The young lady who has the dog was a cross-country runner who ran. She was legally blind, but ran cross-country with her dog and won a big scholarship from us. So I just happen to like dogs. So our Discovery Center, which some of you may have been through. Anybody been through our Discovery Center? An award-winning, amazing simulation program. 25,000 students a year come through. Right now, the waiting list is 100 schools this year. Last year was our biggest with 40. This year we have 100. So if you want to come this year, it probably won't happen if you haven't signed up. Next year, you're going to sign up super early because that fills up every year. We do a speaker series. Has anybody ever been here for one of our speaker series events? We have Medal of Honor recipients, Olympians, public officials, that sort of thing. This was my first big event when I came on board, was interviewing Sandra Day O'Connor, which was kind of cool. I went from teaching in a 7th grade classroom to interviewing Sandra Day O'Connor on stage, which I was definitely out of my league, but enjoyed it. We do professional development, things like Constitution Day. We did a session this summer. I recognize some of your faces from our session on the election, which we'll be recovering here today. But we work with thousands of teachers every year, and we love it. Curriculum, which we talk about. So here at the Reagan Library, we are sitting on top of, literally on top of, about 60 million documents from the Reagan presidency. There's one that people probably are pretty familiar with, the primary source from his speech. But we have 60 million different documents, plus as well as access to the larger National Archives, Library of Congress, that sort of stuff. And we always try to integrate primary sources into our curriculum. We like to build community. We host each year a Simi Valley Youth Town Hall. We like to practice what we preach. Not only in curriculum do we tell students to get involved in shaping and talking to elected officials, but we want to encourage that sort of behavior here too. And I know our friends at Royal High School do a great job of doing that on campus and inviting officials in as well. We have a summer leadership program, a student leadership program. It's a week-long program where students are encouraged to become the sorts of engaged and thoughtful and active citizens that our curriculum talks about. Look how happy they are. Why wouldn't they be? It's beautiful here. We also do a coin program. If any of you are at a high school and you want to recognize engaged citizen leaders, we invite you to sign up for our free coin program. It's just we send out these student leadership coins and certificates, and schools get to decide what great civic leadership looks like at their school. Free to sign up. I think they're going to launch that program in a couple weeks here, September 28th, I believe. Becca, is that right about that? But it's free. Great way to recognize students. There's Michelle. Is Michelle still in here? Oh, no, she's over there. We also do a debate series. So for your students who like to argue, channel that energy in a constructive way, learn to debate. I love debate as an academic exercise because you have to learn both sides of an issue, or as oftentimes there's more than two sides. There's multiple kind of angles at an issue. We give away $50,000 in scholarships each year with our debate series. And in scholarships in total, we give away over $1 million a year here in scholarships. And what we really look for is engaged, thoughtful citizen leaders. So students who are not necessarily Einsteins, they're not, maybe they're not A+ students, although a lot of them do have good grades, but students who are really leaders on campus, leaders in their community. And that's one of my, when I first started here, we gave away $50,000 a year in scholarships. And so in the 6 years that I've been here, we've increased that to $1 million. I would give away every penny we had to engage citizens. Investing in students who do great things is one of the great passions we have here. And we just launched this summer a university program based on leadership. It's in Washington, D.C. It's a really cool program. If I could go back and enroll in it myself, I really would. We wanted to design the type of program that we would enjoy. And it combines the best of academic learning, so great scholars on leadership in the presidency, but also museum learning. So they're going out to historic sites like Mount Vernon, Ford's Theater, Lincoln's Cottage, and learning about leadership on the ground and all across Washington, D.C. So you can all come and sign up too. It's not too late. You'll get credit for it. So that's just kind of in a very quick way what we do in education here at the Foundation. And I want to get into this particular unit. So I think does everybody have a copy? Everybody has a copy of the Election 2016 unit. And I want to throw a question out to the audience now. So when you think about teaching the Election 2016, what are the first things that come to your mind as a teacher? Wait, first let me see. How many of you are middle school? Any middle school teachers? Any high school? How many high school? Any elementary school in here? Okay, excellent. So when you think about teaching the election, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Controversy, right? This is one of the more controversial, at least in my lifetime, this is one of the more controversial elections, right? Anything else that pops into your mind when you think about teaching? Nervous? Why nervous? Yeah, don't even know if you want to get into it, right? It's like that, you kind of peek in, you open the door, you peek in, you're like, is this the kind of thing I want to walk into? And am I going to get dirty in there? And what's going on, right? Okay, anything else? Anything else that? Digital citizenship, right? Digital citizen. Okay, yeah. So digital citizenship. Yeah, tweeting and all sorts of things that, like it takes 2 seconds. You don't even have to think about it. It goes up and all of a sudden, whoa, right? And things can get huge really fast on Twitter, right? If you're tweeting about the election and you tweet at one of the candidates and they retweet it, all of a sudden you got millions of people looking at something. Yeah, there are angry people out there who are not afraid to yell at some poor high school student who's trying to get civically engaged, right? And say really nasty things. We've seen this firsthand. Anything else that you think about when you think about teaching Election 2016? Okay, so there's lots of reasons not to, right? So let me see if I can make a case or reasons why it might be fun. So one of the things we do is we take a project-based approach, right? Because when I was a student and I would learn about the election, like if you sit there and you spend 6 weeks on the finite aspects of the Electoral College, are your students going to be interested in the election at all? Probably not, right? I mean, it's fascinating. Maybe you go into all that stuff. But what really makes an election exciting and interesting is, they're emotional things, right? People get very engaged in them. People want to advocate for a candidate or a cause or a series of causes. And that's great. We see civic energy in the country, whether that's a positive energy or a negative energy, increase every 4 years with a presidential election, right? Sometimes it's kind of a swell of positive energy that builds behind one candidate or another. Sometimes it's a swell of negative energy that, you kind of build on, well, we don't like this candidate, we're angry about it. But it's still energy. And if you capture that energy in a way with your students, you can transform that into a positive force. Regardless if it's negative energy that's feeding in or positive energy, you can teach the students how to process that and make it into a positive, interesting thing. Because being civically engaged is a positive thing. It's a good thing to be interested in the people who are making policy. It's a good thing to be interested in who the President of the United States is. It's a good thing to advocate for causes that you are passionate about. So how do you do that? Do you teach that through a PowerPoint? No, you got to teach it through doing, right? You teach through doing. So this is a project-based unit. And the way that we start off is starting with political ideology, learning a little bit about political ideology. So rather than tell you about that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jeff here, who's going to give you an activity that'll show you how we do that. So Jeff, here you are, sir.
I probably should have handed these out. So if I could have you guys get into like maybe 3 different little groups, like maybe if the ladies over there would join a table, maybe your table, ladies, or maybe, and then have you guys join in here, and you guys can probably join in here as well. Let me give you those. Sure. In here, there's these ones too. Thank you. So one of the things we wanted to start off with is one of the prime questions we ask is, first off, what does it mean to be an American? What do I believe as an American? So we started the question of what are those shared American values that we all hold? And then we wanted to find out what's the most important one? And this leads into an interesting discussion of what do we hold dear? What is it that makes us Americans and makes us different from a citizen in Japan or Sweden or something like that? Sure. So you've got a set of cards. And in the lesson that we have for your students, we actually have it done up to where they're more like flashcards. I made it a little bit more simple with just the definitions that we're using, but for your students, they have a side where it's got the full value on it, and on the back it has the definition. Another way you guys can use it if you want to is you can just print out the side that just has the term and let them investigate it. Oh, sorry, Tony, she needs one there. So you've got a sheet there that's your little worksheet. So you've got your cards. Now you can have them cut these all up just to make it easier to rack and stack them. But first thing, individually, what I'd like all of you to do is you've got a list up at the top of your one page. Circle the top 10 values that are most important to you individually. What do you think are the most important ones? And it's on your handout sheet, the other one that you should have there. Tony, can I get some more of the handout sheets because it doesn't look. Oh, here's some, too. She needs one. Right here. There we go. So, and just so you know, when I was selecting these to put them into the unit, there are some that, of course, that are natural that you would put on there. Some of you may disagree with them being a value or an element of American political culture, but having done quite a bit of research, these are the ones that showed up most common and had the most overlap with each other. And I feel it's a rather complete list. So if you can start to wrap that up. I know it's not easy. All right, now each individually as a group, or at each table, if you would, as a collective team, come up with the top 5. And you guys will all share that at the bottom part of your page. What are your top 5? And you all have to agree on what the top 5 are. You don't necessarily, and these aren't in necessarily any order, just what are your top 5? Oh, that actually just stays all in that box there. And I mean, I would just put it here on this. Oh, yeah.
Okay, limited government to federalism. This isn't democracy also.
If we said right to vote, then I mean, we got to pick between those two. Right to vote.
Right to protest. What was it about? Civilian control of military. Separation of powers. Two. And rule of, oh, you do have that? Okay, three. And rule of law. Two. Freedom from discrimination. Right to vote. Right to vote. Democracy. Equal justice. Right to vote. But equal opportunity, that's a. Yeah. Right to vote is equal. That's why we say the top five. Both are key. Well, it could be freedom of speech or equal opportunity.
All right, let's start tying it together. All right. So do you guys have your top 5 list over here? All right. How about the middle table here? You guys have your top 5? Do we have our top 5? Oh, okay. All righty. So let me ask the table over here. What's your top 5, if somebody would share?
Okay, it was right to vote, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, equal opportunity, and democracy.
Okay. Middle table.
Freedom of speech, equality of others, freedom of religion, right to vote, equal opportunity.
Okay. And over here.
After debate, we talked about it, and we said freedom of speech, rule of law, freedom of religion, democracy, and private property.
All right. Now there was some variety in that one, and I know I heard the debate going on over here that was pretty solid, and I know I heard debate at every single table about how to do it. But and not only is there a great exercise in just having them run through this, I mean, some students probably aren't even going to know that these are shared values. Some of them are going to be like, really? We believe in civilian control and military? Why? It's like, when I play Call of Duty, I'm just making all the decisions. So I heard the debate going on here, and in some cases, I mean, and in previous, when we did this one before, there was arm twisting, like, no, Second Amendment rights have to be on there. There actually was a teacher who was like, Second Amendment rights, you can't have all the rest if you don't have Second Amendment rights. I mean, and that's part of the political discourse, is there's going to be somebody who's going to hold out saying, this is a non-negotiable. This is my number one. And you saw it, and I saw people, they said, okay, how are we going to figure this out? They're like, well, let's see how we all voted. Well, what did we just do by voting? What did we just show? Majority rules, and that we believe in democracy. And it just shows how much people automatically revert to these ideas. And that's where you can say to your students, like, what did you guys do? You guys all just voted on it. That shows just how ingrained it is to do democratic ideals, that we believe in a collective, everyone come together, majority rules. That's how much it's been ingrained. I guarantee you, if you did this exercise with students from a dictatorship, somebody would just be, whoever's the biggest person who could make everybody do what they want, they'd be like, these are the 5. But no, these are the 5. And it's that kind of mentality. But then you also get into a great discussion here of, how did it feel to cross off some values, especially like when you were going from your list of 10 down to the 5. I'm sure there were some that you're like, oh, but I really want that one. Some were obvious choices. Some people have like one when they saw it and they're like, yeah, of course that's got to be on our top 5 list. I mean, I think every single group had democracy, correct? Democracy? Democracy? Democracy. Yeah, no brainer. That one's going to be on there. But then when you started to get into the weeds, then you're like, oh, who's going to be number 5? Does anyone think there's a value that's missing off the list? Yes, ma'am.
Separation of powers.
It's on there.
Oh, no, I was putting that on our top 5. So
Oh, okay. But see, you think that one's an important one that wasn't in your top 5. Is there are there any values on here that you don't actually think are an American value? That you don't agree? And this might be a great way of, and where I thought this one might be an interesting thing, is students from other cultures. Students who are here from another, that might be like, really? And where I come from, we don't believe that. And maybe that can create a discussion there of differences. And is one way better than the other? Is there a better than the other, or is it just different? And then is there somebody who had a value that was so important that it was non-negotiable? It was like, I will not vote unless I get my choice. And there's always going to be somebody who's like that. And I mean, you have to admire their conviction. And it's good that they hold that. How did you handle disagreements? Most of them just went by vote, or you crushed the dissent, and no. And then how do voting and elections connect what we value as Americans? And so it gets into this bigger discussion of, how do all of our values as Americans come to play in an election season? And the fact that you have an obligation to interact, and you have an obligation to learn about the candidates and the topics and to vote. That you have a lot of rights. A lot of people might see some of these values as rights. And a lot of them are. Some of them are entrenched in the Bill of Rights. But then maybe you have the discussion of, with every right is an obligation.
No, I just thought of one of the
Yeah.
values. I think that equal protection of the laws should be included.
Okay.
I don't think they saw that, because I think
Well, I would have said like equal justice. And that's the other thing that you can do too, is perhaps it's not worded in the way you would like. And that's where on the back I tried to give as much of a definition that would encompass the idea. And if you don't perhaps like the wording, please feel free to change that around. All right, so that's just an example of one. And we started off the unit not with a project. We started off with a little thing of the first one being, what do we believe as Americans? Then we go into, what do you believe as an individual? And if you go through there, we have a bunch of the typology tests and those kind of things. But then we actually get into the products. And Tony's going to take it over now and talk about the project-based learning programs that are as part of this unit.
There we go. Okay, I'm back. And we'll do a fun little activity at the end here. We have a box full of delicious food, which you won't get to eat, but you'll get to look at. To talk about kind of individual preferences. Is that exciting to look at food? No, not nearly as exciting as eating it, I guess, right? So once students kind of figure out, okay, so politics is based on ideology and what groups of people believe, party platforms, what individuals believe, how do my individual beliefs align with what I see represented in this candidate or in this party's platform, then we get into the action of being involved in a campaign. And we have two projects that connect to it. So one of them is this, so the students would then be divided up into groups. And this can work specifically for this campaign. And depending on what you want to do in your classroom, if you want to have it be Democrats versus Republicans, you can do that. If you want to bring in third-party candidate or candidates and have students research the various positions of, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, that sort of thing, you can do that. It's kind of open or as close as you want it to be. But the next part is, okay, so once you have these ideologies, once you have these platforms, and once you have these candidates who represent these values, how do you then sell them? So the first project is, in some ways, it's media literacy. How do you both create media that tells a story and a narrative, but also how do you interpret that? Because that's one of the things that is absolutely key for students to understand when they are watching political ads or when they are reading political rhetoric or when they are seeing people post things on their, I guess students aren't on Facebook, do Snapchat, Instagram, that sort of thing. How do they interpret and make sense of the information that they are getting? How do you check your different sources? So some of you might have been in on the previous session that Kami did on procon.org, which is a great resource, and we actually talk about it in there, about looking up what candidates believe, what their positions are. But it's also, for a lot of voters, it's what can you sell them in a 30-second clip, right? If you look at how money is spent in elections, they're talking, I think Rick Hayes was talking this morning about, it's going to be maybe $2 billion in this election cycle that are spent. A lot of that is spent on television ads in swing states, right? A lot of that goes to, in California, we don't see nearly as much, right? Because California is not really a toss-up state. We kind of know from the outset who's probably going to win the electoral votes of California. But if you're in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Florida, and you're watching TV during the election cycle, you probably won't not see a political ad, right? Every television break. So what do campaign ads look like? How do you create them? How do you tell a story? What kind of mood do you want to create? A great resource, does everybody know livingroomcandidate.com? Living Room Candidate, it's a wonderful website. It has every political ad since the dawn of television political ads. So starting with Eisenhower, going up through today. They have political ads that are on there today. And you can see, just in and of itself, having students look at the evolution of campaign ads is a fascinating exercise. If you've seen the President Eisenhower ones, it's a bunch of cartoon characters watching around with signs singing, "I like Ike, everybody likes Ike," right? It's very happy, kind of like that 50s kind of sitcom feel. And then it changes, right? We get into the 60s, it's a much more turbulent time. It's a lot more violent. There's the threat of nuclear war hanging over. Kami showed the Daisy ad from LBJ versus Goldwater. You got this cute little girl, she's picking the flowers, and then she stops counting and the world explodes, right? So that's kind of, some fear-mongering. If you look at some of the Nixon ads, it's just pictures of bloody people in the streets, like America's out of control, and there's one person who can, bring us back. Then you get to the 80s, probably President Reagan's most famous ad. President Reagan was known as being kind of an optimist, right? When he runs for re-election in 1984, he has this Morning in America ad. So having students look at these primary sources, looking at these ads, and in fact, one of the resources that's in our unit is stuff that was released from the archives just for this unit. It was not publicly available. So we had members of our team research in the archives. But you have the actual scripts from the Morning in America ads, as well as the source material that went into the claims. So, when they say, inflation is down 20% or whatever, they have, okay, and here's the study that shows that the inflation is this rate, right? But, and kids are so media savvy now. When you show it to them, you say, what messages is this selling? It's a very optimistic, people are getting married, people are smiling while they're at work, everybody's happy. It really is kind of an interesting way to look at it. And then you flip it and you say to the students, okay, you are now on a campaign team. You are advocating for Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein. How do you make an ad that is going to sell this candidate based on what's important to you as a class? So, I mean, there's one way to do it is to take a vote on what are the issues that are most important in this classroom, right? One of the things our students don't get to see too much is a discussion of issues that are important to them. If you watch the last several presidential election cycles, they don't really get into issues that are all that important to high school students, right, or middle school students. So, I mean, why is that? Yeah, they're not voting, right? So they're talking about other things. But students are certainly interested in those sorts of things. So how do you create an ad, a campaign ad? And when we did our session this summer, we had some people who did PowerPoint, some people who did videos. There's all sorts of different ways to create campaign ads, to communicate, through Twitter and Instagram and photos, and there's all sorts of different ways. So that's one of the projects that is in there. That's the first one. So once you sell the candidate, there's some other resources, and I'll let you look through those. And the second one, which is a lot of fun, I think, especially for students who, and there's actually a role for all different types of students. Some students, if you're like me, when I was a teacher, I had two types of students, right? First of all, there's no matter what question you're about to ask, is there a kid in your class who has his hand up or her hand up, like before you even, like when they can see that you're gonna ask a question, their hand shoots up in the air because they're gonna answer and they're gonna be the one to know. The I know students. And then there's the please know students, right? No matter what you ask, even if it's like, what is your first name? Please don't call on me, don't look at me, right? So in a debate, in structuring a classroom debate, and we're going to see there's going to be 3 debates. These will probably be the most watched presidential debates in history, is my guess. Based on just the ratings from the primary debates, we hosted a debate here in September. 22 million people watched it. I mean, it's just it's crazy the attention that is on for right or wrong reasons. I don't know. As somebody who is interested in civic learning, the fact that people are watching debates, I think, is a good thing, regardless of the reasons that pull them in, right? And so setting it up. So then. The students are going to be a debate. So there's going to be a candidate in your class, somebody who's going to represent either, the candidate, depending on how many you do. They're going to have a research team that's going to be using resources like procon.org or Google or, there's a whole bunch of other resources in there. And they're going to vote on, these are the issues that we want to hear debated in this classroom. These are the issues that are important to us. And so if they don't like to get up in front, they can be a researcher. They can do opposition research. So not only are they researching what their candidate feels, but this is how we're going to take down the other candidate, or this is where we're going to point out the inconsistencies in the other candidates. And then, as kind of the culminating part of this, is you actually host this debate in your classroom. So if you want to set up a podium or something like that, we actually have, I mentioned earlier our Great Communicator Debate Series. We give out $50,000 in scholarships a year. We actually just give that same format as part of this. So students get a chance to make an opening statement. They have to rebut the other side. They have to answer some questions from moderators, and they get a chance to make a closing statement. So when you're thinking about things like, the speaking and listening standards that are part of what you teach now, when you think about things like critical thinking skills, when you think about, the emphasis on nonfiction reading and writing, this is an activity that covers all of those things. And it's a lot of fun. Students get really, really into it. If you have them dress up, if they want to dress up and take on the role. When we did it with our teachers this summer, I mean, the teachers got very into it. As you can imagine, teachers, I think, always have a little bit of drama in them. If they weren't teachers, they would be actors or actresses. But they got really, really into it. And it was a lot of fun. So there's also a number of sample resources in there. There's the debate scoring, there's timing, that sort of thing. And if you're high school students and they do this in class, they can then enter our Great Communicator Debate Series and maybe even win, $10,000 is what our national champion won last year. So it's a lot of fun. So I think we have about 10 minutes left. Do we want to do? Let's do this activity.
Okay.
So I'll turn it back over to Jeff, who's going to explain this activity, which I think you'll have fun with.
And one thing I'd also like to make a plug for is we don't have it in here, but we had one of our interns, he did a great job this summer, how we had some of the background docs on the Morning in America ad. He pulled a bunch of docs also on some of the debate prep and did all that. And if you got one of the USB drives, It's on there. It's from we have a new product called From the Archives, and we have 2 that are on the debate. One really just pulls together all the stuff from the ad, so that you already have that in the unit. The other one, it talks about debates, and it actually has some of that prep material, and it has the actual prep material that they had of like, here's where we're going to go after Carter. Here's how we're going to do this. And it's really great about, okay, here's what's great about Reagan. This is what we need to play up. And it's a really good discussion and for if you're trying to get them to prep. Because the thing that they do in that thing is not somebody's going to act as the presidential candidate, but then someone's also going to be the campaign manager. Someone's going to be opposition research. Someone's going to be that. We have part of the component is everyone has to participate. We have a spin room. And afterwards, the campaign manager has to reiterate the positive things. The opposition manager has to help take down the other side. And so they all play a part in this thing. But like I said, when we started out, I gave you the first lesson, which is more on what do we believe as Americans. Well, this little exercise here is the kickoff for the what do we believe individually. So what we're going to do is this. This table over here is going to represent the products that I put over here. This table over on this side will represent what products I put here. And what we're going to have is I'm going to be pulling out food items. And you have to move by which one you like. So if I put out 2 different products, like let's say potato chips, pretzels. Between the 2, which do you prefer? If you prefer pretzels, come over here and stand by this table over here. If you prefer potato chips, come over to this table. So this is a get up and move.
Yeah.
This is a get up and move.
If you prefer neither, pretend.
If you prefer neither, so around this table right here. If you like pretzels, you're over here. If you like potato chips, stand around this table.
Here we go. Come on. Everybody knows there's nothing better than a potato chip. Pretzels are rotten and terrible. So over here.
Wow, we have some campaigning. All right, now the thing is you can switch as things go. And you have to think about this as at the end of all this, this would be the only thing that you could eat for the next 4 years. This is your choice. And you can swap back and forth as options. You have to think, it's the entire package at the end. So, Skittles, M&Ms.
Oh, there we go. Chewy, fruity, delicious.
Congealed sugar with fake flavor.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, we got some switching.
Oreos, Chips Ahoy.
Oh, there we go.
Where's the third party? I want Nutter Butters. All right. Oatmeal. Cereal. Not necessarily cornflakes, cereal.
Wait, are we doing one by one?
Yeah, but as the entire package as a package changes, you can move. It can either be the whole thing or individually. You have to think about the whole package, but.
Oh, you mean is it the whole package?
Well, I mean, it can be the whole package, but some people feel so viscerally about some product that they might move just for that. Coke, Diet Coke. Remember, you would have to consume one of these.
Diet Coke has turned off some of the
Do
voters.
not get me started on the.
But the Oreos are still here, so don't be too afraid of a Diet Coke.
Cool Ranch Doritos, Nacho Cheese Doritos.
Uh-oh.
Tea, coffee.
Oh, there we go.
All right, and the final one, Spam, canned spinach. All right. So now what do the food items represent in a political campaign?
Ideology.
What in particular though? what they stand for, issues, planks in their platform. And so you are stuck at the end with Republican, Democrat, and so you get to see, you like some elements and you don't like the others. Is there anybody who loves absolutely every single thing in their pile? Is there anybody who loves every single thing in their pile? No, you don't. And is there anybody who really loves their candidate like so much? Who was it who used to say that if you agree with me 100% of the time, you need to see a shrink? If you agree with me like 80% of the time, vote for me? It's that kind of a thing. Was there anyone that had a thing that was an absolute deal breaker? When it moved, or when it went there? Okay. Now, would there be anybody who, like if I took tea and coffee, if I swapped them, would you switch sides? See? So that means coffee is a deal breaker for you. So if a party changed their stance on something, for some people, that's enough of an issue to get them to change. I mean, and have we not seen that in history, where parties went from supporting one thing to the other? I mean, and we see those as realigning elections. You see the things where, I mean, in the past, I mean, after the Civil War, African Americans predominantly stuck with Republicans because they were most instrumental in pushing for freedom of African Americans. Then it switched to the Democratic Party after, typically, it moved with FDR. And after that, African Americans became a solid voting bloc for Democrats. But the thing is and so everyone has their core issues, and if it swaps parties, they're going with that issue. But you can get into all these different questions of, like, is there anybody who stayed in one side and never moved? Okay. But that also may be because maybe that's the only, out of all the topics that were discussed on their platform, either you're agnostic about them or they're not that big of a deal to you. And maybe neither side does it. You have those things that they have like position issues or valence issues. A position issue is one that typically has people on opposite sides, like abortion. You're on one side or the other. Valence issues, crime. There's never a presidential candidate who's going to come out, I want to see more murders on the street. And I'm going to make sure everyone has a gun and everyone shoots somebody else. No one says that. There, it's an issue of who's going to do a better job of that issue. And so if that's your more your thing, perhaps that's not talked about as much because valence issues are the ones, the position issues are the ones that are sexy. That's the one that gets attention. So, but this is a good way to get kids back and forth, moving around, thinking about what they believe. And then the lesson continues on with them getting into the Pew Research Center's study, where you actually answer a whole bunch of questions, and it tells you what group do you belong to. And it's not Republican or Democrat necessarily. It's more like, are you disaffected? Do you feel like that government doesn't speak to you? Are you a young, kind of an activist kind of person? And it gets them into those kind of groups. Then we have some other ones that actually like, who do I vote with? And again, it would be one of those things like what Kami did when he showed up there is had you answer questions and who did you tie most with? And you get kids that are like, whoa, I'm that? And then we encourage you also that when you have these students take these tests, send them home with a blank one. Have mom and dad do it. Encourage them to discuss it. When I was teaching government, I often had that, and that was an assignment. And not only did they have to take it back, but they had to bring it back to me signed by the parent to prove that they took it. And a lot of parents actually like that because they got a chance to discuss. Because one of the predominant questions that they ask in the AP government test is, where do most people get their political ideology from? It's family. Family is the first and foremost place. And so if the family perhaps isn't talking about it, I mean, you're of course going to pick up on clues. If dad's always around the dinner table talking about this party being knuckleheads, the person's probably going to walk away thinking that party's a bunch of knuckleheads. But it opens up the discussion lanes, and then who knows? Maybe dad's always been saying this party's a bunch of knuckleheads, but he takes the test. I guess he's a knucklehead. Maybe he belongs to that party. Maybe he doesn't know that that's the party. Maybe it brings out, Dad, why do you believe that way? Well, this one issue is really important to me. Oh, I never knew that. And so it's a good way of fostering discussion there. So that's it for our little. So.